You're watching Open Agenda. Here's your host, Mike Goldberg. Welcome to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Mike Goldberg. I'm joined today by Trish Melvin of Fruitland and Jim Atkins of Mardella. Thanks for being here. Yes. Today we're going to talk about an internal audit that took place with respect to state grant money that has been filtered through the county.
I'm the internal auditor, Anjali Chattel, and I would like to present Resolution 117-2026, acknowledging the grants audit report. So I attempted to conduct an audit of grants in Wacomico County. The focus of the exercise was to evaluate the controls designed to manage risks related to grant management in the county. I was unable to offer a conclusion level or management recommendations at this time. And these are generally grants that are federal grants or state grants. So I requested for 52 lines. I received none of the supports for any of those 52.
So they didn't respond to 52 requests?
It was one request with 52 account numbers.
Items, okay.
Yeah.
But the audit was inconclusive because very little or no supporting documentation. I should say absolutely no documentation was provided to the internal auditor, despite the fact that it was requested. Wacomico County has administered approximately $33 million in state grants over the past couple of years. Upcoming on July 21st at 10 o'clock a.m. in the government office building, there is going to be a work session with the council and the county's grant administrator, Lori Carter, to discuss these grants and the audits thereof, try to get to the bottom of some of the problems that the county has been experiencing here. Jim, tell me, why do we even have an internal auditor?
Well, back in 2008, the Public Works Road Department, when they were doing their budget and reviewing with the council, there was a large increase in the amount of supplies and diesel fuel that the Public Works was using. Of course, they had answers when the council asked them why the big increase. They had answers. But shortly after that, it was discovered that there were some people in the county who were filling up their trucks with diesel fuel that didn't work for the county.
I've been asked why I dwell on this so hard. About 18 years ago, we were in budget session, and in the budget book, it showed this large increase in diesel fuel usage at our landfill. Well, myself and I think Mr. Cannon, we both questioned that. And it was explained to us that it was due to the cost of diesel fuel increasing, which was true. Information came from the Public Works Director at that time. But we took their word for it. We didn't follow up on it. We failed the citizens of Wacomico County at that time, because we found out a few months later that if the information that was supplied to me was correct, that there was over $450,000 worth of diesel fuel and other items stolen from the landfill. So that's why I have been dwelling on this issue when you have and that's why we ended up with an internal auditor. The fraud auditor at that time suggested that the county have an internal auditor. Now, this is state money. This isn't county money. With the landfill issue, it was our county money. This is state money. But we've been charged with overseeing it. We're stewards of that money.
$400,000 that they ended up losing. They convicted a couple people. The county at its finest allowed the director of Public Works at that time to resign before there was an investigation. So, he got out of the way real quick. And the county council decided at that point in time that they needed to be able to go in and check figures. When there were discrepancies in monies being spent or increases in money being spent over the previous year, they felt like they needed to know why after seeing what had happened there. Lack of control, basically. Mm-hmm. Lack of control. Well, one of the big points that the county executive made about this county auditor, the current county executive, that was a falsehood when she made it. The county auditor, council auditor, audits everyone, the executive branch and the county council.
One of the comments made by the executive's office was the fact that there was a personal bias on your part, unfounded, and yet you're here today and you seem to be trying to assist with every aspect you can to make this happen.
And the executive took it as the council was trying to see what was going on in the executive branch, but they weren't doing anything. That's not the county auditor's purview. She audits anything that she sees that she thinks may be a problem.
And there's a history, not with this executive, but in the county, there's a history of weak financial oversight,
Yes.
Which means all the more reason that audits are important and should be thorough.
It's our tax money, and if there's not enough of it, and there's not enough grant money, if we lose grants because they are not being properly administered, and that leaves our local government very little choice but to increase taxes, and nobody wants to see that. We'll talk about this a little bit more in our next segment, so stick with us. We'll be right back. You're watching Open Agenda. Welcome back to Open Agenda. Thanks for sticking with us. Our topic of discussion today is going to be Resolution Number 117-2026 that was discussed at the June 16th County Council meeting to acknowledge an audit report that was prepared by the county internal auditor, Anjali Chattel.
I was unable to offer a conclusion level or management recommendations at this time. An exhibit, it's a memo from myself, the internal auditor, follow-up to the management response in the grants audit, because they did submit a response, as you can see in there, with multiple exhibits. And then the audit committee chair also created a letter, the concerns regarding management responses to audit reports.
Why don't you go into the details?
Of the objectives or the, okay, so the objectives were to evaluate controls designed to manage risks related to effectively and efficiently using resources, compliance with accounting policies and agreements with grantors, and reporting accurate, reliable information related to grant income and expenditures. And then I would make recommendations if appropriate based on those evaluations. These are generally grants that are federal grants or state grants.
I guess so. The word of the day is you said you attempted. So apparently you weren't successful?
So I received some documents from management, and so I was able to do what I call like the risk review segment of an audit. I'm supposed to do a risk assessment at the beginning of every audit. And then there's the part where I actually do like testing, looking at support documents to compare to evaluation criteria, whether it's policies of the department or law, or a framework, a control framework. So that is where I was, so the second part is where I was not able to receive the documents that were requested for the testing. So that's why I use the word attempted to, because I didn't actually look at those support documents.
You said you weren't able to receive them. Why weren't you able to receive them?
When you look at the management response, based on my interpretation of the response, it seems like because I didn't CC other people, that might have been why. What I was told at the entrance conference, the second entrance conference, in my opinion, it sort of conflicts with what the management response says. And there's, in management response, they actually have an exhibit in there. One, from emergency exhibit E, it says, I was never given a list or approached, as that is the same time frame that Ms. Carter became the point person for grants. So I feel that supports that I was told to send the request to the grant administrator rather than individual departments. But it seems from the management response that I didn't send them to the individual departments, and that's why I didn't get them. That's what, based on my interpretation of their response.
So you were told to do it one way, and you did it that way, but then when you did it that way, you were told it should be done another way.
That seems to be what has happened in the management response. That might be what they're saying.
How much information was withheld?
So I requested for 52 lines. I received none of the supports for any of those 52.
So they didn't respond to 52 requests?
It was one request with 52 account numbers.
Items, yeah, okay.
Well, her response to the audit was that she did not think the auditor had contacted the appropriate department heads. And we've seen this before with other audits, that they claim that the internal auditor is not contacting the appropriate people. I have a serious problem with that because an auditor should be contacting the executive or the CEO of the corporation that they're dealing with and telling them why they are there. And then the executive or the CEO should be making their people available to the auditor. It is not the auditor's job to run around to every department and say, I'm here to do this.
We all come out of the business world. We've all been involved in audits, and what you're describing is pretty much, standard operating procedure. You have a single point of contact, and it is incumbent upon that person, who I believe in this case is actually the grants administrator, Lori Carter, to reach out to the various department heads or other officers of the county who have the information or have the documents that are necessary. But don't you think it's kind of ridiculous to have different to have the county auditor having to chase down a whole bunch of different folks to get the information that she needs?
It seems like there was an initial kickoff meeting where the process was laid out some time ago. But since then, the requirements seem to be vague and or changing and shifting on the auditor and making it difficult for her to comply.
When you do your entrance meeting, I think that's what you call it, that's when you describe the process and have some back and forth, I guess, or to at least explain all the information, all the data that's going to be required, and the processes that they're going to be that you're going to need. So I think that should be clearly all explained in that entrance meeting.
Yeah, and I've started to create a process where I record. So we're doing the meetings virtually going forward, the entrance, the findings meeting, and then the exit meeting through Microsoft Teams with it recording and transcription, so that everybody can get a copy of the transcript, and so it's more clear. Was this said? Was this not said?
Why were these issues not spelled out clearly at the kickoff and for people to follow?
To the best of my knowledge, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, that at the kickoff meeting, that the process for conducting this audit was in fact laid out. It should have been pretty clear to everybody what their responsibilities, what their obligations were. It seems that perhaps the executive branch simply chose not to follow those procedures.
Well, they don't want to follow it up, and it's just like the audit that preceded this one with the gift cards, and they claim that everything had to be addressed through the Department of Finance, and the auditor, when she made that presentation to the council, had 2 pages of emails that she had sent to the people, the responses they had given her, or lack of responses. She had done everything she had been asked to do.
In regard to the grants, I understand the fact that there's a lot of issues and concerns right now with how grants are being done, and the fact that the impression on the part of the council was no doubt that the internal auditor was stonewalled when she was attempting to get all the information she needed, and we sent those type of concerns to the executive branch. So we will be having a work session with the grants administrator. She's actually Lori Carter. She's actually very anxious to sit with the council to try to go over where they are with the grant process and what delays there are, if any, and what all the concerns may or may be on the part of the council. So
You can go back to, and I know a lot of people are tired of hearing about it, but you go back to Safari at the quarry and the audit, one of the first audits that our internal auditor did. And this is a pattern from that point forward. The executive branch does not want to supply any information. And instead of using an audit to make your operation better, to find out where your mistakes are and what you can do to improve it, it's like they're hiding something and they don't want anybody to see it.
Joe, I just had, John, I had a thought. Why don't we request a closed session with the executive branch and the finance department and with Anjali Chatel so that we can iron this stuff out and make sure that we're all on the same page here, because clearly someone's missing the mark and we're not understanding something.
I disagree with you, James. I don't think it should be closed.
Well, if we're talking about personnel issues, Joe, don't you
Well, that's not personnel. That's not a
think
personnel
it's a
issue.
personnel issue?
No, it's not. How's it a personnel
How do
issue?
you know?
It's not a personnel issue.
I think it is worthy of an open work session.
Okay.
The topic of discussion, any of the items that we feel may involve personnel issues, prior to the meeting, Mr. Benson could clearly help us with that, and we could have an open work session for whatever portions was necessary, because the public needs to know. We
Yeah, I
don't
don't
do this.
disagree.
Yeah, and then if there's actually personnel matters that could be an issue, then we could go into closed session.
That's my concern, is if there is personnel issues, that obviously that should be in a closed session, but if it's not, then by all means, let's do it right here.
Well, in many instances, it could appear to be a personnel matter, because if you have inefficiencies in a department, I'm sorry, but you have to explain that publicly.
Yep.
And, either the department head or individuals within that department may feel as if, they've been singled out, but that's, that's just the nature of doing business in a government environment.
It just seems to me that we need to have some sort of work session so that we get this ironed out, because clearly, like I said, someone's missing the mark here.
Well, yeah, and you're not wrong. This has been how long has this been going on since you first began this? It's been has it been 2 years?
And the more you deny an auditor the information they're looking for, the guiltier you look, whether you've done anything or not. The perception is something's not right if the auditor can't do an audit.
Well, the auditor's job isn't to be a conduit for a gotcha moment.
No.
It's to find, any deficiencies in the system that can be corrected, and the auditor would typically propose, some means or methods to correct any of those deficiencies.
The internal auditor is an asset to this county that the executive branch just cannot comprehend that they're an asset. And I really think that the reason they can't comprehend that is because it's a internal auditor from the county council. And the executive branch has a problem with anything that the county council tries to do.
And what a lot of folks may not understand is that every department head in the county government actually reports ultimately to the county executive, with I believe the sole exception being the internal auditor. So the internal auditor does report to the county council, but there's also oversight by an audit commission, an independent audit commission. And the chairman of that audit commission had a few issues with the lack of cooperation that was being provided to the auditor, and even wrote a letter.
I read the letter from Mr. Kaplan, I think it was, from your review board, the audit review board.
Oh, Capon, yes.
Capon. I don't think I've seen quite a letter like that critical of. I don't understand why there's such a divisive situation here between management, county executive's office, or whatever you want to call it, and the county internal auditor. We know what your purpose is. You would think they would welcome I guess nobody welcomes an audit, but you'd think they would welcome an audit that was trying to improve the operations, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And when that happens, it always creates a sense of doubt, I think, with the citizens.
And the auditor herself acts in a professional manner based on everything I've seen. Councilman Ennis brought up the fact that these excuses for not cooperating, and they are excuses, they don't rise to the level of obstructing an audit. You know, who's copied, whether finance department is copied on a memo. These are not reasons. These are insignificant excuses because somebody doesn't want to comply with the audit.
Why do you think that the executive branch seems to be unwilling to comply?
Well, it could be any number of reasons. The best case scenario would be lack of process, incompetence, and then the worst case is, you can go from there.
I think it should also be pointed out that the county charter compels the executive branch to provide any supporting documentation that is requested by the internal auditor. And in this case, it certainly was not provided. This is why the audit could not be completed.
I'd like to see this wrapped up by the last meeting in November. However, that has to happen through subpoena, working together with people. It's absolutely ridiculous that this has taken this long. And as Councilman Holloway said, this creates doubt by not answering questions. It gives the impression you might be hiding something. So I think there's a word for that. I think it's called transparency. We need to get the information that you need to do your job.
And the county council does have subpoena power. But it's my understanding that the only way to enforce a subpoena is to file a lawsuit. And a lawsuit's going to cost the county money.
Costs money.
And I think that the county executive understands that, and then it puts the executive in a position to say, hey, look at all the money they're spending needlessly. But it's not needless. It's to enforce the terms of the county charter. Clearly, there's been a lack of accountability here, and I think that lack of accountability has extended into other areas. Just for instance, the recent trip to Las Vegas that the county executive took along with the director of administration and the deputy director of administration. I think we should probably examine that a little bit further because, we are seeing the same problem infiltrate various different issues. So we'll talk about that when we come back for our third segment. Stick with us. You're watching Open Agenda. Welcome back to Open Agenda. I'm your host, Mike Goldberg. I'm joined today by our panelists, Trish Melvin from Fruitland. Thanks for being here, Trish.
Good to be here.
And Jim Adkins from Ardella Spring. Appreciate you being here, Jim. As we mentioned just a short while ago, that the county executive had recently taken a trip to Las Vegas for the purpose, supposedly, of developing a retail sector to bring more retail businesses, here to Salisbury and Wicomico County. She was joined on that by the Director of Administration, Monkey Luffman, and the Deputy Director of Administration, Steve Lakin.
Good evening, Robert Taylor, a county resident. But I, too, am interested in the junket that the county executive took to Las Vegas a couple of months ago with, as I understand, 2 other county employees. I believe the Director of Administration and the Assistant Director. I could be wrong about that. I could also be wrong about that all being done on the taxpayer's dime, meaning by county funds. We ought to know how much, why did it happen? And I know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but we ought to know that too.
I'm not sure how much money was spent on this, but when you consider the cost of hotel rooms, the cost of flights, meals, it was a considerable amount of money.
But that is not a matter of public record.
I think it is a matter of public record.
If you do a PIA on it, you can do it. But it's something that you should not have to jump through hoops to get the information.
But to get information, we constantly have to jump through hoops. And there are costs associated very frequently with getting a PIA request fulfilled.
Yeah.
They only give you so much research time for free, and then after that, you're
they
paying
want to overbill you. Yes.
at an attorney's
Yes,
rate,
yes, even though they have a
clerk.
doing it, and yeah. But that's another topic for another day.
Has the executive branch offered that this trip was sponsored by a third party, perhaps?
Not to my knowledge. So, once again, we don't know what the real purpose was. Was there a real purpose here, or was this just a vacation? And why hasn't the county executive just simply come out and say, hey, we spent $10,000 to make this trip, and here's what we got for our county as a result of that trip? I don't recall
That's what I
hearing
used
any
to
of
have
that.
to do. If I attended a convention or went to a meeting, I would be required to write a report, what I gained from it, and to justify any future conventions I may want to attend back when I was working.
But there seems to be some consistency here, with respect to the county executive not being forthcoming with information. You had mentioned Safari at the Quarry. There was an audit there, but there was no supporting documentation whatsoever, and there was an economic impact statement that likewise had no supporting documentation. So this is a recurring theme from the executive. I'm going to do what I want to do, but I'm not going to tell you why I did it or how much money we made, or more importantly, how much money we lost.
Well, these types of trips, the Las Vegas trip, the bond trips each year to New York City. Now, the bond trips in my world, the world has changed. They're video conferences now. Should be able to do video conference. Should be able to stay in Salisbury and do a conference. But even if we need representation in person, my problem is, why do we always need 3 people to go represent the county? We have a executive, an administrator, and a deputy administrator. And whenever one of these junkets is taken, they all go.
With respect to the bond rating trips to New York, wouldn't that more appropriately just include perhaps the executive and the director of finance? Why do all of these administrative, personnel have to go?
What I have is, how well is this known among county taxpayers? I mean, I know we talk about it, but
it's not. It's known amongst the people who attend the council meetings,
or watch open agenda.
The people who watch them, and But other than that, the majority of the community is not aware of these things, or just doesn't care about these things, and that's the sad part about it. I mean, I think a show like Las Vegas, if it had been a trade show for bringing jobs and businesses to the county, would have been great. We've got the property at St. John's built at Naylor Mill and 50.
Right next to the sheriff's office.
Right in front of the sheriff's office. There's a second phase of that's supposed to be built, which has been, to my understanding, put on the back burner now, because the one building that was built, they had a tenant scheduled to move in there who has now backed out of that because of the current economy in the county. So now we have no tenants moving into that.
I did the drive-by a few weeks ago, and it looked like there was 2 tenant spaces that were undergoing tenant improvements, but they were together. So I'm assuming, side by side, so I'm assuming that it was a single tenant who had leased 2 spaces. But otherwise, all the rest of those tenant spaces remain vacant.
Well, it may be, and I'm just going based off what a reliable person told me about that building, that the only tenant that was in there has backed out before they moved in. So,
well, that is interesting. Yeah. Retail sector follows growth in
Industrial.
other sectors. If you have manufacturing, if you have warehouse distribution, that's what creates the jobs, and it's what creates the well-paying jobs. And it's only when you have people coming here and they have well-paying jobs and they can afford to go shopping, that's where you get the benefit from the retail sector. That's about all we have time for today, but we'll be back very soon with another show. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Almost had it there.
Almost had it.
Not something to smile about.